Hello and welcome to all of our webinar attendees today. My name is Kayla Kurtz. I'll give you a brief introduction here in just a second. But as I'm sure all of you are aware, today's webinar topic is going to be the 10 things to consider when coordinating PPC and SEO campaigns. So today's webinar is actually a joint presentation between Intro Promote and Hannafin Marketing. I'll let Eric introduce himself here in a second, but again, my name is Kayla Kurtz, and I'm the paid search consultant at Hannafin Marketing and also a writer for PPC Hero. Eric, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Kayla. My name is Eric Dafforn. I'm the president at IntraPromote, and we are thrilled to be having this joint webinar with our friends from Hannafin Marketing today. IntraPromote is a boutique organic and social media marketing company, and that makes us a perfect fit for Hannafin. So thanks to Hannafin, thanks to all our attendees, and we're really happy to be presenting to you today.
Awesome. So first we want to give everyone just a brief intro to all the topics and questions we're going to be covering in today's webinar. So really briefly, we're going to discuss what the difference is between SEO and PPC, how you coordinate your SEO website structure with PPC account structure, how keyword strategy varies for SEO when compared to PPC, how you can align your landing page recommendations and optimizations between SEO and PPC. Then we'll discuss a little bit about how results are measured differently and how results can be reported. We'll also go into what the largest challenges are with SEO and PPC, how ROI is calculated for PPC when compared to SEO. We'll have a discussion over if you need both SEO and PPC, and if you do, why. We'll discuss how PPC and SEO work together. And finally, we'll go into what's needed to implement SEO or PPC. Also, as an added bonus for today's webinar, we've set up a hashtag PPC SEO on Twitter. So if you have questions throughout the webinar, we've got a couple people watching that for us, and they'll send those questions our way. And we'll have some time, hopefully, at the end to answer some questions live. And then we'll do a follow-up post on PPC Hero as well with all the questions we answer live, as well as any that we don't get to today. So without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So first up is the differences between SEO and PPC. And the truth is they are very much two different verticals. In terms of PPC, the acronym PPC actually stands for pay per click. We also refer to it as paid search advertising. So these are going to be ads that are clickable advertisements appearing above and next to your organic results in the search engine. In terms of what you are charged for, you pay for any time your ads are clicked, and then of course if you're working with an agency, you're going to pay for any management and agency fees that they tack on as well. To give you a visual explanation of where PPC ads can be seen, I apologize, there are going to be a lot of Indiana University and or Hoosier basketball references. I'm an IU alum, and I don't know if people have heard, but our basketball team is serious this year. So as you can see here, if you search for Hoosier basketball apparel on Google, the PPC ads are going to show up in the slightly yellow highlighted box up top, and then also over to the right of the search engine results.
All right, in terms of SEO, the acronym itself stands for Search Engine Optimization. And really what that means is we are optimizing or tweaking or in some ways changing and updating our site to perform better in the organic portion of organic search engines, such as Google, such as Yahoo, such as Bing. Now, the way clicks are earned in SEO is through a meritocratic process. And of course, each engine will define merit a little bit differently. However, it's all about quality. It's not a bidding process. Organic clicks are those that quote unquote earn the top spot or the first page ranking. And typically they'll appear beneath paid results in most cases, because in most all searches now there are premium ads at the top of every page. And in terms of what a pay structure looks like, for organic SEO, you pay the SEO company to make recommendations or to change the site itself, but all resulting clicks from that optimization are free. There's no engine fees. All money is based on the services of the SEO agency and the recommendations that they provide. On the next slide, we can see that these are a small and large version of the same search. On the left side, we have the top organic spots for a given query, just to show you relatively where they live next to PPC results. And on the right side, you have a full screenshot of a search result to show you while organic listings do not populate the very top of the page, they do populate the majority of the page.
Great. So now that we've got a brief introduction to PPC and SEO and how the two are different, we want to start diving into how to make these two things work together. So the first thing that's up is how to coordinate your website structure, which is typically more SEO oriented, with your PPC account structure. So why is this important? Because from a very top level, you may say the two are, while they need to be working together, they're two very separate buckets. But it's incredibly important to make sure that structures on the website and the account are coordinated together. The reason for this being is from a PPC standpoint, it really makes it much easier to be sure that all of your services and products are covered. So if you build your PPC account by looking through your website, you're going to be sure that you've got all your categories, subcategories, and products or services listed. From an SEO standpoint, this also allows for increased relevancy. So making sure that you have the most important things represented in your website structure and your PPC account structure ties the two together, and as simply put as possible, in the terms of the search engine, makes things seem a little bit more legit. It also helps agencies work together. So if you have your PPC and your SEO outsourced to two separate agencies, which isn't abnormal anymore, you need to make sure that the two are consistently communicating any changes that occur in the website or the PPC account structure so that they can realign those things together as needed. So the next bucket where we're going to jump into is keyword strategy and how that varies from PPC to SEO. When it comes to PPC, we really work on a cover all bases mentality and then sort of rein things in as we go. We want to make sure that we're not only covering what our business refers to, our products or our services as, but we also want to make sure anything that a searcher may be typing in to find us, we're covering that as well. So along those lines, that leads to lists of thousands, hundreds of thousands of keywords that we really need to focus on and that have to be included so that you bring in as much of the search market share as you can. This is going to include short and long tail keywords, and we'll go into an example of that now. So here you can see, I told you, another IU reference, but here you can see the difference between a short versus a long tail paid search keyword. What you're really looking at here is how you can drive traffic, but also pull down an appropriate return on investment. So if you use just a term like Indiana University, the competition here is fairly low for that term, and there's a lot of monthly searches that are occurring. On the other side of that, if you go to a slightly longer tail keyword that gets a bit more descriptive, you're going to push down the total number of searches and the audience base that you're going to be going after, but you're going to have a much higher likelihood of a greater ROI because you're specifically going after someone who is very much so looking for the product or the service that you are offering once they get to your site. So there needs to be a very delicate balance here of pulling in as big of an audience as you can, all while making sure you make enough money on the back end to continue running that PPC.
All right. In terms of SEO, the keyword strategy really lives at the intersection of the content that you are able to create and where that meets the content that users are out there searching for. Now, there's no limit to the amount of content you can put out there. And as such, the amount of keywords that you can use to attract people or the types of queries you can get from organic clicks are really limited only by the amount of content that you can create that actually does eventually merit ranking for specific queries. Now, as we said earlier, there are certain aspects of SEO that are different from PPC. One of those is how we look at the short versus long tail. There's going to be a lot of things we consider when we're talking about whether we're pursuing short or long tail terms, and one of those is we like to drive toward competitive very competitive phrases that may be short, but we also, in doing so, are going to earn a lot of longer tail phrases just as sort of a collateral benefit of that. Finally, when we're talking about keyword research, as we said, that's the core of any organic SEO campaign. And we use a lot of interesting tools to help us figure out what people are searching for. Some of these are free, like Google Trends. It's been recently updated to provide a lot of interesting features, such as year over year relative demand changes. You can sort it by country, by region, by state, by language. You can sort it into a lot of different categories. And it's a really nice tool to tell what people are searching for in relation to other terms that you might be pursuing. And finally, one of the things that a lot of companies ignore that we really, really try to push hard is your own site's internal search feature. When people go to your site and they type a search query on your own custom search box, and we hope you have one of those on your site, what are they searching for? That is a golden invitation for you to drive your content strategy. That is users inviting you to create the content that they are looking for. Now, sometimes maybe you already have that content and you just need to bring it a little closer to the surface. Sometimes they're just being lazy and they want you to do the navigational work for them. But a lot of cases, they are going to give you some insight about some stuff that you really should be producing content on, but you're not. So that is our keyword strategy in a nutshell. One of the ways we look at the success of a campaign, and we'll go on into measuring and reporting quite a bit later, is for some campaigns, we'll actually measure how many unique phrases are driving organic traffic. And that has been complicated a little bit by some recent Google changes that have taken place in the last year, but it's still a pretty good predictor of how our content build out is going. For example, we want year over year to be attracting organic visitors from a larger and larger query set. And this is one sample report from that. When we talk about aligning the landing page recommendations and optimizations, this is really a place where PPC and SEO can work together. And what I'm going to use this slide for is really sort of a plea to clients to help these two either departments within an agency or two separate agencies work together. These agencies absolutely need access to each other. Okay, and you might think, well, gosh, if I hook up my PPC guys with my SEO guys, aren't they just going to have a bunch of meetings and without us involved and do a bunch of stuff that we don't know about? Chances are the answer is yes, and you absolutely want that to happen. If you've done your due diligence in selecting your PPC and SEO agencies, by all means, they should be meeting without you, just so that they can work on strategy and have a well thought out presentation for you. Second, you need to be telling each agency what's going on with the other agency.
Send these to Kim Kevin Culkin at work.
Sorry about that.
No email address for Kim Kevin Culkin.
My Mac dictation feature is going a little crazy there based on what I'm saying, so I apologize. You need to communicate the changes about agencies to the other agencies so that they know what's going on. If there's been a budget cut in one keyword area, those two agencies need to know that so that they can compensate for the keyword loss. Similarly, while the two agencies should be talking offline, you do want a triangle meeting where the PPC department, the SEO department, and the client are meeting. So the schedule for those meetings can vary, but we recommend probably no more frequently than weekly, but no less frequently than once a month.
So as Eric alluded to in one of his previous slides, we are definitely going to go into measuring results and reporting in quite a bit of depth. So when it comes to PPC and measuring results, the thing that is really exciting about PPC is you can see some fairly realistic real-time data. Generally speaking, you're looking at maybe a few hour delay in terms of being able to see specifically where clicks were coming from and where they were headed. But it is truly just a few hours in most cases. You can definitely see some cause and effect relationships over, again, just a few hours or potentially a couple of days. And it allows you to say, if we made this change on Monday, and these are the differences that we're seeing in traffic on Tuesday, it's a highly likely that the cause made the effect happen. Also, in terms of measuring results with PPC, the overall number of metrics is absurd almost. You can quite literally put together a report for the exact same client, either internal or external, with 20 different metrics and finding the exact same data and pull it in a completely different way in 20 other kinds of metrics. So it's very exciting in that there's a lot of data that can be pulled out and you can see that data rather quickly, but the overall number of metrics sometimes makes it also rather daunting to determine what things need to be focused on, what things should be measured, and how frequently they should be measured. So this slide is just a quick example of one way you could measure your results coming from PPC, or you can see in analytics here, they actually call it CPC. So this is just a view of how many visits come in from Google and MSN, or the two that are highlighted, that are coming directly to the website from PPC only. So this is just another way that PPC can show how it's assisting in your overall advertising, not just from a click standpoint, but in visits to your website as well. Yeah, okay, great. So this slide is also showing, this is what I was referring to when it comes to the overall metrics that you can compare. So here I've chosen click-through rate and conversion rate. Typically speaking, if you're seeing an increase in click-through rate, you should also see an increase in your conversion rate if you're making the right optimizations. There are obviously more than two lines here on this graph, so what I've done is I've compared click-through rate to conversion rate, but then I've also compared that relationship to the same relationship in a previous snapshot of time. So what this allows me to do is say, okay, if these results were happening last year as well based on the same changes I was making, then there's more of a concrete relationship between click-through rate and conversion rate. Again, the possibilities here are nearly endless, and I could add 7 or 8 different metrics to that particular graph and compare them all against one another, and then also against those same metrics in a different snapshot of time. It's all about determining how relationships between different metrics and the changes that you're making in the account, how they are resulting in the back end of your data.
Great. As Kayla mentioned, there's no shortage of ways you can measure things. And the critical element to us is always figuring out of this sea of data, what are the most important things to watch for. And we've broken number 5 into the measurement, and then later we're going to talk about the reporting aspect. Really, these are pretty similar. There are a lot of things you can measure. And in SEO, like with PPC, there are, measurements that are all the way very, very granular, very, very microscopic, all the way to some very, very big picture macroscopic things. And really, it's going to depend on the client when they come in. What is it that's important to them? For some large brand sites, it just might be page views just to increase branding. It might be visits. And we can go all the way down to the measurement of, for example, people. Let's find people who spent more than $100 on a visit that came from a non-branded keyword on a Thursday. I mean, there's literally no limit to the things that a good analytics package will let you measure. The key is, once you have that data, are you able to turn that into some actionable intelligence that's going to help you make a good decision about where to take your strategy next? And there's a lot of data that you can mistakenly correlate with good or bad results, but it's not necessarily causal. So we always recommend making sure that the data we're watching an ample amount, but not so much that we get lost and paralyzed by the amount that's purely flowing in. When we talk about SEO, the changes that we make to a site are not realized or not made live as quickly as they are in PPC. We'll go into the scope of SEO changes and recommendations a little bit later, but typically we believe that changes to a site's performance organically typically come about in weeks or months. There's a process involved in getting the engine to see the changes, to notice them, to reevaluate them, and then finally to reprioritize or re-rank pages based on the changes that it's seen. And that can take a while so far. So, like we said, the changes are not overnight. Sometimes you can get Google to crawl a new page, almost as quickly as you can edit it. But changes generally, to be safe, we talk about in terms of weeks or months. One way that we promote SEO is that we can earn clicks that we didn't necessarily anticipate. You can be targeting a particular 2 or 3 word phrase, but it's important to watch the perimeter too to see what clicks you get that you might not have realized. You might be querying, or you might be optimizing your site to rank for a phrase like throat cancer if you're a medical information site. Well, don't just look for throat cancer in your keyword reports. Look for anything that contains the phrase throat cancer or the words cancer and throat in any sort of order. That way you're going to be able to see more the impact of the changes that you've made. And overall, there are just, like I said, nearly an infinite amount of metrics you can look, you can measure. And if you want to go to the next slide, Kayla, we'll talk briefly about some of those. Before that, though, this is a slide very similar to what Kayla posted, and this is just where we would measure if we were looking just at visits in for example, a Google Analytics screenshot. Where would organic fall on this particular site that we're looking at? And just the way Kayla showed her cost per click measurements on that, we would report typically on organic listings based on a report like this. Moving on to the next slide, though, I believe we show some additional ways to measure, including visits, including the specific keywords that people are searching for. We often divide referring keywords into 2 categories: branded versus non-branded. Because non-branded keywords, for example, if you are if you're J.C. Penney, you're not going to have too much problem ranking for J.C. Penney keywords. However, you're going to have more of a challenge ranking for things like men's jeans, women's blouses, purses, wallets, etc. So there's a level of competition, level of challenge to non-branded keywords that branded keywords typically don't have. So that's one reason we divide those. And then finally, conversions are very important, of course. If you're an e-commerce site, a conversion would be a sale. But if you're not an e-commerce site, you can still have conversions. Maybe you want people to look at a certain number of pages. Maybe you want people to look for a certain file and download it, etc. So any site can have conversions, and we recommend all our clients create some sort of archetype for measuring conversions, whether it's a sale or not.
So as we said before, we really split this up into measuring results and then going back to how to report on those results and the way that they're measured. So when it comes to PPC, weekly reports are not abnormal. And the reason for this is because, as I discussed previously, you can take snapshots of changes in data day to day, almost hour to hour, week to week. So you do have the ability to pull this weekly report and show how data has changed, how performance has increased or decreased, and you're still going to get quite a bit of information and insight into that comparison. When I mentioned the total number of metrics, and again, I'll ditto what Eric said in terms of the almost infinite number of metrics that you could report on. With PPC, what we really try to do for clients, internal and external, is pull out maybe the top 5 or 8 account-specific key performance indicators that really tell us how well the account is performing. So if it's an account that's geared more specifically towards branding purposes, we're definitely going to want to report clicks. If it's an e-commerce client who is obviously looking for website sales, we may not necessarily report clicks to them. If we do, it'll certainly be much further down the line in terms of importance for their KPI. What we're really going to focus on is PPC specific revenue and cost per acquisition. Also, in terms of reporting for PPC, you want to still use that cause and effect from your results and put that in your reporting. So with PPC, you never want to just show a client a list of a bunch of numbers and a ton of graphs and say, this is it, this is how performance is now, this is the comparison of that same performance to a snapshot previously. You want to explain what caused the current performance to be in the state that it's in, whether it's better or worse than the time you're comparing it to. And then you also want to explain where you're headed from there. So what you learned if things started to go sort of south, and if things worked out really well, what you learned and you're going to duplicate across other accounts or other campaigns for that particular client. So this is just a quick screenshot of a weekly report that we would put together for a client. You can see it has things sort of segmented out from Ad Center and then also AdWords. So you can see the differences in the metrics across the two interfaces. And then it's also got a culmination of all of that data together. You can see the metrics that are chosen as sort of key performance indicators for this client along the top. And they'd be able to see this against the exact same data for the week previous. So again, it's all about setting up these reports so that they have the information that's most important to the client and to the account, as opposed to throwing all of the data and all the information into the report, because you could quite literally be looking at an entire book worth of a week's report.
Great. When it comes to SEO reporting, there are a lot of similarities to what Kayla was describing in terms of PPC reporting. One of the things that we always recommend is that we report year over year instead of month over month. For example, if we were to report on November organic traffic and compare it to October traffic, we're going to be disappointed most likely, because at the end of November, there was a week where most Americans, at least, spent a lot of time offline, not doing much because of an American holiday. So because of the seasonal features that appear on calendars, as well as the seasonality that just about every business has, whether it realizes it has it or not, we want to compare October versus last October, November versus last November, and so on. So that's one aspect that I wanted to tell you right away we believe is very important. On a typical schedule is going to be either monthly or quarterly. In our agency, we don't find a lot of benefit to reporting more often than monthly in terms of traffic, just because there's constant flux in rankings and traffic based on keywords, and it ends up being a lot more effort than there is positive results when we're reporting more often than monthly. Quarterly for some clients is adequate, but it can be a little bit of a stretch in between that 3 months. So we typically gravitate toward the monthly reporting. As Kayla said, goals are as diverse as your client base. They depend totally on what the client is looking for. What we like about SEO is the changes we make to a site are long lasting, they're durable, they create positive impact well beyond the short time period in which those changes are made to the site. So you can be still receiving clicks 3 years down the road from a change you made 3 years ago. So that's one nice thing about that comes through in SEO reporting, is that you can still draw conclusions about traffic trends based on changes that you made months or years before. And finally, in reporting, we're going to talk about challenges later on, and I'll cover this a little bit more then. But if you want to move to the next slide, Google has, for the organic SEO crowd, thrown a real monkey wrench into the style of reporting that had been going on for a decade or more. Whenever you are logged into a Google account and you perform a search and you click an organic result and head over to a site, that site's analytics cannot tell what keyword you chose to go there. And that's very frustrating. And Google did this in the name of security, because they don't want ad retargeters out there sniffing URLs and figuring out what you searched for in your Google search. And I get that, but it's frustrating. But what SEO does to combat that we've done a lot of things, and when we follow up to this webinar, we can put out some links that we've to articles that we've written about how to deal in this keyword not provided world. But for example, now a lot of times we will, instead of measuring the specific keyword that brought people to the site, we'll segment organic traffic and show where they landed. So you might see a report like this where we show various article titles or landing pages and the amount of traffic that came to them. So now the landing page that people came to is still unobscured. You still get that full data. Some sites are now noticing that 40, 50, or more percent of their organic traffic is listed under that keyword not provided label, and that can be very frustrating. So there are a lot of workarounds to that, a lot of strategies that we've used to make up for that lack of data. But that is one thing that the PPC world does not have to deal with, because Google has not obscured keywords in a PPC campaign. So that's just one of the differences. But the SEO folks are working very hard to be able to combat that and have a lot of plans in place to report what we still can report on and still get an accurate picture of how our campaigns are going.
Great. So, of course, PPC and SEO are not simple advertising verticals. And to that end, we wanted to make sure that we immediately address, what some of the largest challenges are with the two. When it comes to PPC, the unknowns are, of course, a huge challenge. By unknowns, I mean, client issues or concerns that they may not be vocalizing to you, but they definitely have in the back of their head. Search engine algorithm changes. Usually we know when those happen, but we don't know all the things that are changed within the algorithm. We never know all the pieces of those algorithms ever. So those unknowns, they do make things a little bit different and difficult, especially when it comes to, best practices. So there are a certain number of, rules and basic guidelines that are held as universal truths in terms of the best things to do with your paid search. But there are plenty of opportunities and times when I've seen these best practices not work well in accounts. So not knowing necessarily what keeps that relationship from, always working or not working, it does make things a little bit difficult. When it comes to smart competition, I'm referencing both competing smartly on your own and then also your competition getting smarter. So you need to make sure that you are being as competitive as you can be with PPC, all while keeping your own requirements and needs with the return from that PPC in mind. So even if someone comes into the space who's brand new and they start bidding up and they're showing up at better ranks than you are and better average positions, is it necessarily the best idea to drive right towards that competitor and try to bid them out of that spot that you were in previously? That's a huge challenge because it's tempting, right? It's very tempting to say, no, we want the top spot, but you have to sort of temper that and be prepared to make the best decisions. Likewise, your competition is doing the exact same thing while you are. So maybe they're watching that spot and trying to gauge how much performance you're getting out of that spot, and that's why they've sort of gone for it. With all the websites that are out there in existence, you can track to a certain degree what your competition is doing in terms of paid search. So this is definitely a challenge. It makes it a little bit more difficult than it was in, even a year or 2 years ago to get a step ahead of the competition because everyone can watch what everyone's up to. The third bullet here is something that's a challenge, and I don't know that it's really always been seen in accounts, but you hear a lot where you're working with a new client or an existing client and they just say to do all of these things. So you've got a hit list of 10 optimizations that you think will ultimately lead to better performance in your account. You want to make sure you pick and choose and prioritize that list and don't do too much too fast. So the cause and effect relationships I was referring to and that Eric was talking about before, if you don't pace out the optimizations that you're making, you make it really hard for yourself to be able to track back and say that this optimization made this result in terms of performance. So that's another challenge because you want to do as much as you can, as quickly as you can, all while being able to track those changes as well. And then the last thing are just those out of control factors that you can't necessarily have an effect on. So this is, again, search engine algorithm changes, competition getting into the vertical when if you've pretty much had a reign on that. That's out of your control. There are going to be new competitors. If there's a fairly tight and much predetermined budget that even if performance is being blown out of the water, you can't get a higher budget. These are just some things that are, they're out of your control and they can be very frustrating, but you just have to learn to work through them at the best of your ability.
All right. When we talk about the largest challenges in SEO, we often think it boils down to communicating the demands of the algorithm versus what clients are sometimes able or willing to do. Content is what engines are looking for, and not just a lot of content, but excellent content, unique content, content that can measurably be favored by people, whether it's a Google +1 or whether it's a like or whether it's a tweet or a retweet of a specific article or whether it's inbound links to specific articles. Content creation must be constant. We suggest building up a library of information around a topic, not just a 250 word page that you're just going to hope ranks for about 1,000 different phrases for that particular topic. Building content forces you to stay sharp. It forces you to either become or remain an expert in your field. And we also think have it, with your CMS, with your server, with the content system that you have, try to have a system ready for rapid publication. I mean, it doesn't do a lot of good if there's a trending topic to have to, write a piece, get it vetted through some department, send it to IT, who puts it in a queue, and in 35 days it finally gets published. Content is what SEO is all about. So content creation and the need to be doing that constantly is one of the largest challenges that people face. Similarly, building authority, quote unquote authority, is something that Google looks at. In other words, it knows that Amazon.com is an authority on online shopping. It knows that Zappos.com is an authority on footwear and a lot of other fashion accessories now. You don't have to be one of the 800-pound gorillas on the internet to build authority. It certainly doesn't hurt, but you can become an authority on some very niche topics. And when you are that authority, Google has a way of figuring out through other signals, whether it's social signals or inbound link signals, what you're an authority on. Again, we recommend always less focus on trying to trick Google into thinking you're an authority on something and instead placing a lot of focus on actually being that authority. And that authority requires, the reason people are a lot of times out to trick it more than actually become that authority is tricking it on the surface looks faster. Well, I don't have time to read for 3 months and do research for an article. I need to rank for this term in a week. And that's really just not realistic in organic SEO. And that takes me into, time and patience. We tell clients to ask themselves honestly, what is it about your site? What is it about the content you have where you believe you deserve to rank for something? And that's a hard question to ask, because a lot of clients come to us saying, well, that's what we're paying you for, to get me to rank for this. But really, no one knows your business like you do. And we don't come to a client saying we're an authority on medical information, or we're an authority on footwear, or we're an authority on automobile tires. We may be authorities on the industry trends and the keyword research, but no one's going to be able to write an article or build a 50-page topic library like you are. And so we will help Google understand that information. We will help Google crawl it and index it rapidly. But ultimately, the client has to have the desire to be the expert and be patient about the amount of time it takes to build content out based on our recommendations. Take the long view. We try to fight against the, we need it right now mindset, and instead say, hey, a year from now, what do you want to look back on and say, wow, we've really improved in these ways? And then we look for that time period, a year from now, or 6 months from now, or 18 months from now. It's very similar to when you're learning to ride a motorcycle, and they taught us in a class that I took a long time ago. When you're going through a corner, you look at where you want to arrive. You do not look down and look at the process by which you are arriving there, because if you do, you are going to crash. You need to look at where you want to end up, and during that turn, you will end up there. So we recommend that clients take a long view about content and say, look, in 12 months, I want to have a body of work that's this many pages and covers this many topics, and we'll get them there. But patience is one of our largest challenges. And finally, algorithmic changes. For example, if we go to the next shot, we'll talk about some of the changes that Google's been making. When we say algorithmic changes, it's not as if, oh my gosh, we were doing something naughty and Google spanked us for that. That's not the case. There are plenty of very ethical, very engine terms of service focused SEO agencies who also need to respond to what Google does. For example, if you look at this slide, this is really interesting. This represents over the last 18 months the number of URLs from a particular domain that ranked in the top 30, or more focused in the top 5 for a specific phrase. Over the last year, Google has decided, hey, in a search for Pontiac, or in a search for uh, Honda, or in a search for Holiday Inn, or in a search for any sort of big brand product or service searches, we want more diversity. We want more variety there. And so for a lot of big brands, the number of URLs that have shown up in the top 10 has dwindled rapidly. So here's a sample query from a big brand product query that shows 18 months ago there were 4 URLs in the top 10. Today there's 1. Did the site do anything differently or wrong? Absolutely not. Google just decided to change things up, and that's what we have to react to. So there's a lot going on every day. And I just read an article yesterday that said any given Google searcher is likely to be a test subject for up to 10 or 12 different interface tests that are going on at any given time. Google makes about 400 to 500 algorithmic changes per year, and that's on average 1 to 2 a day. So the challenge is to keep up with what Google's doing and showing, but still have that long view, that long content focus at the forefront. And that's a really good look at what we see day in, day out as the biggest challenges for SEO.
Great. So now that we've gotten past, yes, there are challenges and we are just going to work through them, we want to discuss how to calculate ROI for both PPC and SEO. So, of course, return on investment means simply that. What do you get out for what you put in? And when it comes to PPC, you have to look at this in a couple of different buckets. So first, are you talking about an e-commerce client or a lead generation client? If you're looking at e-commerce, you're definitely going to be calculating how much revenue came out of your total ad spend investment. When it comes to more lead generation type clients, you want to assign a particular value to different leads and say, this is the absolute most we can afford to spend on this particular lead. You also want to say, these are the target number of leads we need to pull in a particular month, and getting to either that revenue or that lead number. That's how you're going to calculate what you got out. In terms of what you put in, obviously there's the ad spend that it takes to pull in that e-commerce revenue or to pull down those lead generation leads. But if you're using an agency, you also want to make sure that you're calculating in your agency fees with that, so that you're truly getting the revenue and the leads that you need to get, all while using an outside agency to do so. Now, I think it's incredibly important to note that these are not static numbers. So more often than not, when we onboard a new client at Hannafin, we've got a certain number of goals or fairly vague goals, and the client, they're coming to an agency for that next level of assistance in determining specific return on investment goals. Even if they come in and they have very specific goals and that we need this much revenue and we need this many leads in a month, After working with an agency or with your PPC team for a certain amount of time, you may determine that segmenting out your revenue or where your leads are coming from is the next best step in terms of increasing performance in the best way possible, which is also going to make those goals that you set up previously no longer static. So you're going to be changing your goals frequently, and you want to make sure that you're segmenting as much as possible so that you're not cutting out leads to spite your overall investment goals. So this is a quick snapshot of basically how you would look at your return on investment. This is a comparison of total ad spend against revenue that came in just from PPC for a particular client. So as you can see, there are a few times when it's almost a break even, and that's not what we're looking for, right? We want to be bringing in more revenue than we're putting in money for ads. But looking at that correlation between the two allows you to see when you made changes that were positive and a more of a broad spectrum, and when you made some changes that maybe weren't of the best interest for the account. So generally speaking, it's all up to the client and what their goals are for revenue or leads, but you want to make sure you're consistently tracking what you're getting out of what you're putting in.
All right. Calculating ROI for SEO is similar. There is no end to the potential complexity of calculating it. I mean, obviously, we have how much did you spend compared to how much did you earn. That's obviously the easy boiled down equation. But what goes into how much you spent and what goes into how much you earned? Are we taking net profit divided by our costs? Are we taking total revenue divided by our costs? That's something that can vary from client to client, and it's something that really should be brought up right away at the beginning of the campaign so that we don't have a client and an agency each developing their own ROI calculations. And then, when it comes time to report, everyone's on quite a bit different page about exactly how much ROI the program produced. Now, that bookkeeping aside, what factors go into it? Well, there's the agency fee. There's the, typically SEO agencies will work on a project basis or a monthly basis, and along with maybe some ad hoc costs about, that are passed on, such as, special projects for development or measurement or things like that. But let's say on average, we have a monthly fee, and we have to be able to put a monetary value on what's going on there. So if it's e-commerce, it's pretty easy to calculate that. If it's not, then we need to figure out a way to monetize maybe visits or monetize certain actions on the site. There are no engine fees when it comes to calculating ROI for SEO. As we said earlier, no SEO money goes to the specific engines like Google or Bing. Instead, it's a service fee paid to the SEO agency. So there's not that additional element to take into account. What you do need to take into account is what time, if any, is spent by your own internal development team or IT team or marketing team or whoever is actually implementing the changes that the SEO agency recommends. That's something to factor in, because no development squad works in a vacuum. When a development squad is working on implementing SEO changes, they are not working on something else. And so the value of that other thing they weren't working on is something to consider. So with that in mind, one of the nice things about ROI for SEO, if you're calculating it as benefit over time, it can continue indefinitely. For example, if you want to move to the next slide, this shows a time period in which we made recommendations for a certain auto parts manufacturer and distributor. For several years before this, they had remained in that flat line formation that you see at the beginning of this graph. Right about where you see the arrow is where we made specific recommendations. And subsequently, they've seen month over month and year over year growth that is significant, based entirely due to the one set of recommendations that we gave them about a year and a half ago. So if you are looking at the amount of revenue and the amount of traffic that they are getting over time, and we, this was a major crawling and indexing project, and before this, Google could not access 95% of what was on the site. You see that over time, they'll continue to reap the benefits of this, and in double the amount of time, ROI is going to double because the amount of revenue has doubled, but the cost that went into this hasn't changed. It was a one-time fixed fee for a job. It was very effective, and they continue to reap the benefits of that. So that's one thing to consider too. There's no faucet that turns off in SEO. It's not as if they're going to undo these changes. So the work that we've done there does not disappear, and that's one of the real benefits of SEO changes to an entire site. So we're getting close to the bottom line here, and I'm going to try to speed this up because I want to have some time because there's been some really good questions asked. Why do you need them both? Well, the two different disciplines are able to address different buckets of potential customers. For example, PPC can be very flexible about where in the funnel they are trying to attract people. They can buy people based on comparison terms. Maybe you want to compare the Chrysler Town and Country to some other things, and you can have a landing page and buy those comparison keywords and be up and running. Maybe you're looking for people further on down the funnel who have buy signals in their query or pricing signals. You can use PPC to really laser target that, and then from that, you can see what works and pass that on to the SEO team. It rounds out your web presence. Absolutely. We want to control the real estate on the search results page. There is no clearer way to put it. We want to own as much of that as we can because that increases the odds that we are going to get that visit. It's that simple. The two help each other out, and they do help each other out. And a year ago, Google put out a very interesting study. Now, granted, this is Google, who makes its livelihood selling PPC ads, but they also have a very strict adherence to scientific methods. So consider this. They realized that 89% of PPC clicks are not recouped when you ditch PPC and just go with organic. And what that means is this. They did studies about people who had fixed budgets and fixed click rates for both organic and PPC. And what this addressed was, hey, what if I say, hey, I have a pretty good PPC listing, but I also have a pretty good organic standing. I'm going to bail on PPC for a while and recoup those clicks organically. Well, what they found out was if you bail on PPC, you don't recoup those clicks. You get about 11% of the clicks of what you thought you were going to get, and 89% went somewhere else. Here's the bottom line. PPC clicks are going to get a certain percentage of clicks, whether you're there or not. Organic clicks are going to get a certain percent, whether you are there or not. So we recommend a full suite. We want presence in both, and that's how the two can help each other. Finally, something that's been really hot over the last year is called cross-channel attribution, and that is where you say, okay, someone clicked over to my site from a PPC ad. They ended up buying something. But you know what? Turns out they were there 3 weeks before from an organic ad. So what cross-channel attribution is a way to give partial credit to the various traffic sources that ultimately resulted in a conversion or a visit or a sale. And that is now part of Google Analytics standard reporting. It's pretty standard in a lot of the big reporting platforms. And we're looking very closely at that because what we're realizing is sort of the way they say no man is an island, no one online marketing traffic source is an island either. So we have a lot of evidence to show that people are coming over from organic and then later they're converting on a PPC ad and vice versa. So we recommend full report sharing and full cross-channel attribution monitoring so that we can know exactly what role these sort of secondary characters are playing when there's a conversion with one final traffic source.
Great. So now that we've all sort of gotten on the yes, you do need PPC and SEO bandwagon, how do those two work together? My first point here really piggybacks directly off what Eric was just talking about. So what PPC is going to do for SEO is it's going to push some additional traffic to the site that may not get there otherwise. So once you get those people on the site through PPC means, there's potential that they get familiar with the brand of your site, and then they may come back organically themselves in another way. So you need to have both buckets open in order to have that full web presence that we were just talking about, and make sure you're sending as many people to your site as you can. When it comes to quality score, that's an incredibly important metric and factor in paid search. And we do quality score analysis fairly frequently. A lot of times what we can find when we do this quality score analysis is that we're hitting all the major targets in terms of how the account and the account structure should be set up. But we learn that there may be some site speed issues on the site, because site speed does factor back into PPC. However, that's also a factor for SEO rankings. So if the PPC team can find some issues potentially with site speed that may have been unfortunately overlooked by the SEO team because they're focused on, a different metric on that particular month, your PPC team can alert the SEO team that maybe site speed needs to be looked at, and both sides are going to get better because of that one find. Also with your search query reports, in terms of PPC, we talked about short tail versus long tail, and something that's really important here is changing and implementing keywords that you may not, as a business owner or as someone involved directly in your business vertical, you may not think of as how searchers are looking for you, but you pull that search query report and you find out that this is a whole new way of audience members to find you. Again, this is information that you can pass along to your organic or your SEO team and have them see if there's anything they can do with that information to work that into the SEO strategy. And again, that's going to benefit both sides.
All right. On the other side of that coin, how can SEO and PPC work together? Well, just like PPC can show a lot of things that SEO didn't find, SEO can show a lot of high converting phrases that PPC didn't anticipate. Like we said earlier, you might be pursuing a 2 or 3 word term, but you're going to find a lot of terms that contain those words that are also driving traffic. Perhaps more traffic than is driven by that single high demand keyword. So we always recommend thorough sharing of data, saying, hey, look, we ended up finding about a half dozen phrases that really ended up in people sticking around a long time, that had a special term in we didn't anticipate. We can pass that on to the PPC squad and say, look, here's some stuff that we recommend bidding on if you can figure out a good bidding strategy for that. Now, when Kayla talked about quality score, that's important because Google's PPC algorithm is an algorithm. I mean, it has an algorithmic component to it, just like the organic portion does. And the better a page scores on this quality score, the less you have to bid to get a higher placement. And a lot of the changes that we are making on the SEO side, whether it's page load speed, whether it's optimizing the file name, whether it's optimizing the URL, whether it's really cutting out the fat of some body copy and page arrangement, the elements of the page, those things that we're doing. If you're using landing pages from the main site, those can improve the quality score of the site as a side benefit. So work that's done for PPC can benefit, or work that's done for SEO can benefit PPC. And signals that PPC is taking in turn, maybe they have a low quality score and they pass on to us, hey, we think our quality score is getting hit here. That in turn is just the opposite effect. We can take that information, make long-term changes to the entire site, and that's going to improve organic listings as well. So the ways that they can work together are there are many of them, and they are significant. We recommend full information sharing. Give the other team information whether you think it's going to help them or not, because they're probably going to find something in there that they can use that you might not have expected. So you can't share there is no practical limit to the benefit of sharing this information with each group.
Great, so that is going to bring us to our last segment, which is how to implement both PPC and SEO and what's required of each. In terms of PPC, the first thing that I always talk about, sometimes ad nauseum, is the communication and the handoff of that PPC effort. So especially in situations where you're taking over an account that's pre-existing, either from another agency or from an in-house team, you want to make sure that that handoff is as seamless as possible. So have the handoff timeline planned out before you get started. Make sure that the communication begins at day one and is maintained throughout that handoff. And of course, communication both with PPC and SEO from the client to the agency is of the utmost importance. So making sure you implement a communication schedule, preferred methods of communication, all of that is incredibly important when you're implementing PPC. This one's going to seem pretty simple and basic, but you would be surprised how many people take on an existing paid search account and they just assume that the tracking is functioning as it needs to. In order to get started in PPC, you need to place tracking code, period. And if you're implementing a PPC strategy on an account that's already pre-existing, you cannot possibly hurt yourself by double, triple, and even quadruple checking that tracking is set up before you get started accurately, so that you're getting the best data from day one as you can. As I mentioned with the communication, you definitely want to have some goals and timelines set up as far as a schedule, but you also want to have goals and timelines set up for reporting, for particular KPI metrics, and when you need to hit goals with those numbers. And again, that feeds back into the communication loop where that information should be exchanged and almost double and triple checked on both sides a few times to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I believe Eric is going to go into this in a second as well, which means that it's incredibly important for implementing either PPC or SEO, but you have to have true buy-in from the entire team. So if this means the CEO at the company you're representing needs to know about what you're doing with PPC and SEO, try to get them involved if you can, all the way down to whoever your direct contact is with the client. Everyone needs to understand the importance of PPC, and everyone needs to know that if they can be involved and reporting and providing the information you need from them, then you're going to have the highest success rate in terms of paid search and making that advertising a profitable method of advertising for you.
Great. And before I go into requirements for SEO, I want to let everybody know we realize we're running up against the end of the hour here. We have a ton of great questions. If you asked a question, we have it, whether it's over Twitter or in the GoToWebinar system itself. We will answer that question. We have everyone's registration emails. We're going to make sure that this webinar gets out in recording format, in a slide deck, and we're going to probably write individual blog posts covering a lot of the questions we didn't have time to answer. So we'll get those answers to you. We really appreciate you asking them, and there are some really good ones there. So don't worry if you don't get the answer before you leave this hour. We know a lot of people have to drop, but we'll get those answers out there. So thanks. So in terms of implementation requirements, SEO requires a lot of development. And the good things about SEO changes are a lot of times we can make changes that are very scalable, but they, maybe they affect 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 200,000 pages. And when a development team is able to know what our goal is, hey, these title elements, the elements in the title tag, we really need those switched around. We need these URLs to not be duplicates of each other, et cetera, et cetera. They can be very creative in doing that, but there are a lot of big sweeping site changes that are required for a good SEO campaign. I don't want to push it too hard again. We talked about content a while ago, but it requires content. Don't even think about ranking for a term that you don't discuss in depth on your site. It doesn't happen as much now as it used to, but we used to get a lot of people who say, I want to rank for X, and X is nowhere to be found on that site, and it just does not happen that way. There are, SEO and PPC need to realize, hey, you're not the only game in town. Our development team, our IT team, they've got a lot going on. Our marketing squad has a lot of stuff going on. There's more to this world than the SEO agency, okay? We get that. So there's a line sometimes. You're not highest priority, even though you think you should be. So we realize that there are some time requirements on the people that are going to end up implementing these changes, and that's going to put us behind schedule. And we try to work around that, but that's something you need to going into it. And finally, like Kayla said, buy-in. We want to work for clients who are excited about working with us. When you have the marketing contact who hired you in there, but maybe their VP is sort of incredulous about it and is not giving that marketing contact a lot of freedom to really be creative in this SEO campaign, then that can hamper us. obviously the goal is universal buy-in and excitement about an organic SEO campaign. We can work outside of that, but it makes it a lot harder. So we hope that that there's internal buy-in before any vendor is selected.
Great. So that covers all of our 10 bases in terms of how you can really coordinate your PPC with your SEO. And really quickly, just to wrap all of that up into kind of 3 really all-encompassing bullets. In order to, maximize your online presence and round out to make sure you're reaching as much of your audience as you can. It's not a matter of whether you choose PPC or SEO, it's how you can run them at the same time together. Communication within the two is incredibly important, both between the agencies representing the PPC and the SEO and the client, and then those agencies working together as well. The more transparent and the more information that's shared, the better each of those options is going to be. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you're consistently measuring and evaluating both. You never want to say, well, SEO had a great month. What's going on with PPC this month? They're not necessarily things that should be compared against one another. They are separate, but they're incredibly equal in terms of the overall impact that they can have on your web presence and on the success of your online advertising. So as Eric said, we're going to take, I think we can squeeze in a little bit of time to take at least a couple of questions live. And we both are offering some really exciting offers, both from Intrapromote and from Hannafin. So we encourage you to take advantage of those. We've also given you guys our contact information because we're huge about continuing this conversation offline. So reach out to Eric and I if you have any specific questions, and let's take a couple questions now.
Right. If you're ready, I'll just read a few that I have here. Some really good stuff. Where does local fit into this mix? Now, if you search for something like pizza places in a restaurant, or even if you search now for something like Toyota Camry, for example, you're going to see local results. And that's really a webinar topic that could live and give its own hours worth of information. Bottom line, or local results are a segment of organic in that they are not bid on and paid for through PPC, but they're done through the Google plus local interface. In other words, Google's pushing businesses to have a Google plus location account or Google plus page set up for itself. And that's, if you search for Google Plus for businesses, there's a way to have, a page for every one of your brick and mortar locations, or if you're a single standalone operation, that's easy to do too. But that's how you get into Google local results. I have a PPC question here. How do you measure the effectiveness, the relative effectiveness of ad copy versus landing page copy? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think that usually the first step is aligning the two almost directly. So anytime you can have copy or content in your ad text that they then see almost directly duplicated on the landing page kind of instills this secure feeling in the searcher that, yes, they clicked on a paid ad, but they got ultimately to the information that ad was promising them. From there, then it turns into a testing situation. So was it that your ad headline matches the headline on the site, or is it that the content matches the content on the site? And then swapping that out. So maybe maintaining the headline and using different kind of copy from the content on the website in the ad. Overall, I think that you need to look at the two completely separate. So when you're considering the overall effectiveness of your ad copy, you want to look at your click-through rate. And when you're looking at the overall effectiveness of your landing pages, you then start to look at conversion rates. So I wouldn't necessarily compare them to one another directly, but there's certainly a relationship between the two for finding what the most driven message is for your searchers.
Great. Here's a great budget question. What do you suggest the starting budget be for a small business? And if you want to cover PPC first, go right ahead, and then I'll cover SEO.
Sure. Budgets are very much dependent on vertical, on competition in that particular vertical. So there's definitely not a base number that you can say every small business should start out with X number of budgeted dollars for PPC ad spend. What you really should do is do a little bit of research ahead of time, or ask your um, agency to do that for you. So we do something called a market reach analysis for accounts that are going to be brand new to paid search, where we basically pull together a beginning keyword list that we would bid on. We get average cost per click numbers, estimated impressions and searches in a given month. We apply some generally accepted industry click-through rates and conversion rates, and we basically populate all that out to get at least what we perceive would be a starting off initial budget.
Okay. In terms of SEO, there are agencies out there that will do things for $500 or $1,000 a month, and then there are some gigantic agencies that won't talk to you unless you have $25,000 or $30,000 a month to spend on organic SEO work and reporting. We're at neither extreme. We find ourselves somewhere in the middle. The important thing is, if you're quoted a price, find out what you're going to get for that price. Ask for case studies and ask for references. You need to talk to other clients that this agency has worked with that that can tell you, yeah, this I spent this much and it was worth it. I spent this much and it wasn't worth it. Or maybe I spent this much and I would have paid twice as much because they were awesome. Or, just find out what you're getting, and ask some, try to figure out whether what you're getting is fluff or whether it's really going to make an impact on the bottom line. And that's, again, a topic that probably deserves more attention, but ask around for other companies what they've used and whether they've had good luck with them, and good luck with that search. It's complex.
Yeah, Eric, I was just going to say, I think I agree with you fully. I think doing a little bit of friendly research to get some word of mouth reference is certainly key.
Right on. Okay, here's a great question. You guys are obviously two different companies. What are the advantages of using two companies versus a company that says they do both SEO and PPC? Well, I'll start, and if Kayla, if you want to follow up with what I've missed, that would be great. Having two firms or having one firm, neither one of those is a guarantee of tremendous service, and neither one is a guarantee of horrible service. We've seen, there are some large agencies with PPC and SEO in the same house that they might as well be 1,000 miles apart with no communications between them because they're walled off. They work under separate management. They work under separate P&L. There's just not a lot of communication between them. Whereas, there are some SEO and PPC vendors who are separate but operate, tremendously well together. I think Hannafin and Interpromote are a great example of that. We share a common goal of success for the client. We know that if, for example, let's say we're working on SEO and Hannafin's on PPC. If SEO isn't working out, we're going to get canned, and PPC isn't. So you don't have the cushion of, well, we're a big agency, at least PPC is doing well, or at least SEO is doing well, and that's going to carry the other, the other segment into success. We don't have that sort of luxury. So in a separate situation, we're out there fighting for our lives and the continued work every day and struggling to continue to earn that business. So that's in our assessment, and obviously we're biased because we are, sort of boutique firms that just provide the one service, but that's how we approach that.
Yeah, I think the only follow-up I have to that is just that to me, even working at an agency, it's all about the passion behind what's being completed in terms of the work. So if you can find an agency that's got incredibly passionate SEO and PPC account managers in that one agency, and they're taking both incredibly seriously, their, guru status at both, then I agree. I don't think that you're doing yourself a disservice necessarily by having essentially one agency of record to do both. I do think that if you don't feel that passion and that necessity for success from the two buckets under one house, then outsourcing it completely separately, you may find a little bit better success because, truly, as an example with Enter, Promote, and Hannafin, we're both incredibly involved and passionate about the SEO and the PPC work we do respectively. So overall, I think it's just an attitude and an overarching passion towards the work that's more important than whether everybody's all at one agency or you have them split up into different ones.
Great. We have more questions than we can handle. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, I've got time for one more question.
All right. Let's see. Um, Boy, is there a scenario in which a client should only go with PPC and not be concerned with SEO? Well, Kayla, why don't you talk about that? Why don't you talk about that? If from your perspective, and then I'll give an honest assessment myself.
Yeah, I think that usually when I've had this discussion with someone, it's all about budget restrictions. So it's truly whether they can quote unquote afford to do SEO and PPC at the same time, or if they need to pick one or the other. Um, of course, and I think we've driven this point home throughout the webinar, but we prefer that that decision not have to come through. In the event that a decision is made or a suggestion is made to go with just PPC instead of SEO, I would say if you're doing PPC and not SEO, really make an honest effort as the client or the account holder to, if you're making revenue or if you're making some additional funds for yourself out of PPC, use that to fund the SEO necessity on the other side sooner rather than later. There are certain small businesses that, due to budget restrictions and their e-commerce, they can more specifically control and affect what they're doing in the PPC side of it. But you need to make sure that you're working towards funneling SEO in as soon as possible.
Yeah, and again, if I were to address that, I would honestly say, yeah, I think there are some situations where PPC is a smarter move than SEO, and that is, again, budgets are tight. I'm sure you'd love to have $1 billion to throw at this. No one does, or not enough of you do. What I would say is, PPC by itself is a great way to start, do some testing, and see where eventually you could throw some SEO focus. And this is very similar to what Kayla was saying. But yeah, since the changes we would make on the SEO side to the site can take a while to implement, um, you know, they are multiple. You don't know exactly what's going to work and what doesn't. PPC is a much more effective testing ground for that stuff that is going to give you some insight about, hey, this silo of keywords did tremendously. This silo just were awful. We're going to build out an organic content strategy that mirrors that. And I think that's a really smart way to go for some people.
Most definitely. Well, I think that, like Eric said, we've got a tremendous amount of fantastic questions. So we'll either reach out to people individually using their registration emails. Definitely going to put together some individual blog posts both on Intrapromote and PPC Hero addressing the specifically PPC or SEO geared questions. So we promise you guys are all going to get your questions answered, and we certainly appreciate you for sticking around with us and taking in all this bonus content. So thanks to everyone for attending the webinar, and we hope to speak with you all again very soon.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great
Thanks.
day.